All right. I believe we are live. Hi, everyone. This is Arpad from the YouTube channel Starpath Academy. And tonight I want to give a little bit of a news and opinion and maybe a little bit of history of, uh, of government control over currency and absolute control over the flow of currency. So before I start with that, though, could you please let me know how the sound quality is for you? Please rate the sound from 1 to 5, where 5 is the best, as in pretty good. So once you do that, then I'll start reading some of the news regarding CBDCs and kind of tell my opinion. Hi, Ahmed, or Ahmed's wife. Thank you very much. Looks like the sound is good. Okay, perfect. Thank you for joining. Feel free also to ask questions. I will take a couple of questions on from the chat a bit later. Right now, I want to um, answer just a couple of questions that I got on my buymeacoffee.com/starpath academy account. Thank you for all the members and all of you who have bought me coffee there. So one coffee purchaser asks, I watch your YouTube videos and I really enjoy your channel. Keep up the good work. People will eventually find you on different platforms. I think you should either have your own paid speaking engagements. Thank you very much. Or at like a George Gammon event. You're a good person. Thank you very much. Yeah, and get together with Maneko 64 again. The two of you are a great couple. One of my favorites. But thank you very much for the coffee. And it's flattering. I do watch George Gammon and some of the stuff that he says, and I think we are in agreement on many things. And yeah, I should invite Mario from the Maneko 64 channel um, to my channel. I should probably do more interviews. I was just too busy, and doing interviews just takes more time. But I'm planning to do it more in the future. And the question goes, another person who bought a coffee. I have difficulty imagining that people nowadays will agree to sell their house for gold coin. Do you really think the shift in understanding, thinking, mentality will change so rapidly that it will happen in the next 5 years? And my answer is yes. I think there will be a parity again. So I did a whole segment or whole video about this, that I think we will get there again. Um, the issue is what is the usability of gold and when can you use it and how can you use it, right? So things have to get really bad in order for people to get there. But it's not going to be the person who owns only one house, right? And they have so many options that they can do outside of that house, right? Um, but it's more investors who will be looking at the market, looking at government clenching down on assets, and they will want to move some of the multi-generational wealth that they have accumulated, right, through the prosperity years of the prosperity generation, multiple generations in the West, and they want to pick that off from the ground and move it into something else, right? So historically, that has been the case where these extremities are in play, such as the Weimar Republic, I guess Romania, but many other hyperinflationary stories, including the Hungarian hyperinflation. I mean, Russian, you just name it. I mean, and there's more than 90 something countries that went through it, right? That we recorded. So it's usually the case where they still have the capability of exchanging something for gold. Gold has not yet went completely on the ground, and they foresee what's going to happen, and either the calamities will be so bad in some neighborhoods that they want to exchange that to something that they can run away with, right? And historically this has been gold. So it's not that difficult to imagine, right? When Bitcoin was what, $65,000. You could argue there would have been some houses you could buy for 1 Bitcoin, right? Why? Well, people want what they want, so it's a supply and demand. It's just simple as that. So why do they want it? Well, everyone has its own personal reason why they want it, right? But Bitcoin, as a maybe really nothing in the sense of no physical value attached to it, it is very transferable. Maybe they wanted to leave the country real fast, right? So there has been, I mean, some government officials took their um, wages in Bitcoin and whatever. I mean, you can think of many crazy reasons, right? But it's usually the utility of something, why they want something, right? The circumstances. And I believe in the future there will be again come a time where, in fact, an ounce of gold may be much more than a house worth, right? And again, where is that house and how bad the economy gets? So it all depends on that. Because if you go to Detroit during the 2008 2009 real estate crash, right? Uh, there were probably houses that would have been sold for $1,000, right? So there you go, a coin. All right. So now, kind of hopefully answering that question. But I do believe in the next 5 years. Unfortunately, things have been really progressing or speeding up, especially with the Russia Ukraine situation in Europe and the energy crisis and inflation getting to the point where the average people are also experiencing it in their pockets, right? Inflation was always there. I mean, if you look at the chart of the dollar, how much value has been lost. But for long times, inflation is usually just gets stored into various asset classes. But when it trickles down to the average folk, then um, they get to spend that money, right? The newly freshly printed currency, and they get to spend it on stuff that they wanted, right? And now they get to experience inflation. So just to give you an example, right? If government prints out a bunch of money, right, and it hands it to the very wealthy, then guess what? The prices of yachts, of Rolls Royce, and fancy watches will go up because that's the stuff that they buy, right? There's going to be more currency in float up on those echelons, right? And the price of that, including stocks, bonds, or whatever they want to invest in, will go up. They push the price up. But then you get the same wealth effect. It trickles down because you might be owning the same stock, right? Or you might be working at the yacht company, or you might be working at the fancy watch company. Maybe your salary gets increased and so on and so forth. Eventually it trickles down, right? It's fairly unprecedented, but during the pandemic crisis where you were handed money, right? We even skipped some of those steps and you immediately got some money. Well, guess what? Now, what you spent your money on gets to be inflated. The same reason, it's just on a different level. So, uh, the thing is that with the high inflation, or that's why I'm saying the inflation was always there. It was just in asset classes that you didn't really care about. Now that it has been trickled down, now it's in asset classes that you care about, and it turns out it's absolutely freezing the economy up. And I don't see how they could stop inflation without um, fully crashing the U.S. economy. And unfortunately, some of Some people on YouTube would be looking forward to it, average people, because they think that, it's somehow worth it. As long as people they don't like suffer, they don't mind the whole US economy crashing and people suffering. And I just can't relate to that. But anyway, next 5 years, I can totally see it because things are getting faster and faster. And here comes the exception. So I have been talking about hyperinflation for a reason, right? And I always pair two things in order to hyperinflation for happen: the loss of faith in currency and the loss of faith in government, right? And usually, loss of faith in government in history goes first, because government issues the currency, but the currency is good even outside of the walls of the city, right? If you go back to Roman times and so on. So currency, especially, used to be silver, but even when it's paper, it, there's a time difference. There's a lag in time um, where the central government fails, in the sense of they lose they people lose the faith in it. But by the time the edge of the empire realizes that you can still use the currency. And sometimes, if they can fix the problem immediately, then they never lose the faith in currency. But you have both, then hyperinflation happens. And that was the case in Romania as well. So government immediately failed as in a communist government, and the Soviet Union failed, but eventually the currency failed. Well, it was right after. It didn't like it took 6 months or so, but um, here's the exception, right? And I want to read this, and this is from the whitehouse.gov page, right, from the briefing room. And so I'll post a link to the web.archive.org page that will link or that will have the White House Gov page in it, right? So if you don't know about web Wayback Machine, you can just archive any link that you may not want to visit, and you can put it there. It will grab the content for you, it will store it, and you can read through that web page. But of course, feel free to go to visit the White House Gov page as well. So the briefing is the following. Background press call by senior administration officials on the first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. So there's a lot of buzzwords here. Whenever they say responsible, right? That doesn't necessarily mean what you and I think it means, or when they say equity or equality and all of that stuff. But whatever it is, I'm not going to read through the whole thing. It's really boring. It's this conversation, but I want you to get the temperature of the of this administration, but probably it doesn't really matter. It would be red or blue. I think this would be the same. These are overarching things. I'm not like saying, but I want you to get the temperature of the feeling of the administration towards central bank digital currency. That's what they're actually talking about, but also crypto. Okay, so here's like just a short paragraph. To advance this work, Treasury will lead an integrity working group to coordinate and consider questions necessary for a potential CBDC. The working group will leverage expertise from across the administration and support the ongoing work of the Federal Reserve on the CBDC. It will engage in this information sharing with our allies and partners to promote responsible development of CBDCs. Right, and on it goes. It's just a bunch of word salads. Yeah, and the second report reviews current use case for crypto assets and their effects on consumers, investors, and businesses. And this includes effects on underserved communities and those who are most vulnerable for the risk of crypto assets. As we've seen over the past few months, risk stemming from improper conduct related to trading of crypto assets continue to present an especially grave area of concern. This includes frauds, theft, and scams. And period. So, I mean, this is very, very long. And boring. It uses the boring language. I mean, if you would just want CBDCs, you know you're gonna do it. Just do it. Like, just come out with the CBDC, ban all crypto, ban everything. Just do it. Have be ballsy. Go on full dictatorship. You don't need to write all of these fancy words. Nobody really cares. The people who who should care don't care at all, and the people who care already know your plan. So this is all for show, right? Of course, this is a joke, right? But don't take me serious. Okay, so yeah, it goes on and on, but basically, we have known this, right? The coming of CBDCs, but now it's seeping in more and more into the mainstream and what they're trying to do. So to me, it feels like, and you could say this was planned. I'm not saying this was planned, although it could have been planned. But the crypto space, right, kind of was the water, kind of made the wedge into the rock, right? That kind of eroded eroded the hard money people in order to sweeten the future that might come, right? And now, once that wedge is there, now in goes the hammer, all right? One crypto to rule them all, a government crypto, right? Which totally doesn't make sense, right? Because the whole idea, to me at least, the introduction of crypto was to be totally decentralized, not rely at all for governments. But now, if this sector gets taken over by government, you have none of the benefits of a decentralized network. You have nothing, none of the positives, but all of the negatives plus some, right? And the negatives is traceability, right? Whatever happened on the blockchain from the get-go, it's still on the blockchain. Everything is traceable. One of the big, I don't want to say scams, but it was definitely a false promise of many of the crypto, was that oh, it's anonymous, right? Nobody gets to know what you're doing. Well, it's sort of like email. Everybody knows what you're doing, especially if you use Gmail or one of those providers. They just scan everything, right? So everybody knows exactly what you're doing, but they might not know who owns the email account, right? So they kind of left that out. Well, nobody will know. Well, it's very easy to implement KYC, know your customer rules, once the big trading houses come in, because all they care about is profit, right? Whatever, Coinbase, Binance, you name it, that doesn't matter. Wherever they're trading crypto, they care for profit, right? As companies should, right? I'm not saying they shouldn't, but um, once I actually listened to CZ, who I think is the head of Binance, right? Um, an interview, and he was boasting about how easy it is to gain access to some of these markets, like Italy specifically. He said, or 6 months ago, they said, well, no one can trade, no one should come here and trade these, um, assets that are so dangerous, blah blah blah. And then they just weasel themselves in. Well, I mean, they probably should. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm saying, like, it's easy because all you have to do is suck up to these regulators and you're in, and then you can make profit. And how this became, and he's a smart dude, right? How this became sort of like something that used to be a negative for the crypto space, it became something very positive for Binance against some of the competitors who are not seen as legitimate trading houses, right? So I named them trading houses, but you can do platforms, whatever. So, so it's quite easy as long as they implement tracking systems, which we should just say. It's fairly easy to go in because, um, and of course, they have to limit to some crypto or whatever, as some would be less dangerous than others. It's total nonsense, or well regulated, non-regulated. And what you have now is just basically the stocks of, in my opinion, and you could be loving crypto, it's your, your life, you could do whatever. Um, Now you have just the stocks of companies that don't produce anything or close to anything, and they're treated as stocks. You can trade, but everything is traced. Why don't we just use, I don't know, Google stock in order to do purchases? I mean, I could trade stocks with you, and you could purchase my YouTube content with it. And I don't necessarily own Google stock, but we can find some stock, right? That you could provide me, and I would give you content for it, or access to buy me a coffee or something like that. So, in the sense, we're actually going back to something we already had, we just didn't think of it like this, and we're getting none of the benefits, right? None of the benefits that was in the promise. And this is sort of a semi rant, of course, I understand. So, if you think about it, like how paper money came into existence, and they talk about, right, how silver and gold used to be money and so on and so forth, but then these were the certificates of deposits for gold and silver at private entities, right? It was at private entities. So okay, Myers and Sons, whatever, had a gold depository. You deposited gold there, and that they gave you a ticket, Myers and Sons, and it said like, okay, 2 ounces of gold, and you would go and trade that, because anyone could go into the gold depository, exchange the deposit, right? So of course we know about the fake stuff and how they inflated it, provided more certificates of deposits than, of course, I just made Myers and Sons up. But you can look into the actual history and how this happened. But it was basically private money, right? It was private money. It was a private money issued by a private company, but it was so convenient to use it, right? And what happened afterward? Well, government picked up on it, right? Especially China. In China, I think they printed the very first paper currency. Hey, these private entities are using a more efficient way of doing commerce. Why don't we just print our own by the government, right? So it's history repeating itself. You go from something very physical to something very efficient, right, in speed of trading, right? But that is because of the private sector pushed that in, but now it's taken over, and now government does it and centralizes all the deposit, right? And then the blah blah blah, the US government had certificates of deposits of gold and so on and so forth. So it's the same, very same pattern repeating again. They first introduced, you know, cryptos, and now government is issuing its own crypto. And of course it will kill most of the crypto, in my opinion. As in, not necessarily the value of it. I'm not saying it's going to go up or down. I'm saying the whole idea of it. Why have why use um, cryptocurrency with know your customer laws if you just trade the government crypto, right? So what what I left out, of course, and you probably, I haven't looked at the chat yet, but you probably noted, or hopefully um, at least commented. What about private crypto, right? So, well, we already have cash, and we have private crypto in the sense of like um, Pirate or Monero or Zcash, right? Or some of, well, Zcash is sort of halfway there. It's not fully private, or you can use it private way, but not, you don't have to, right? So what's going to happen to them? Well, what we can say, what's happening with cash, right? And I looked at, I believe it was Ninja Nation or one of those YouTube channels. I'm pretty sure it was Ninja. Yeah. So he was talking, and this is anecdotal, of course, but I think you already know what we're getting here. Where we are getting here is that cash is being less and less used, and it's being more and more cumbersome, right? So for people to use it anywhere, and unfortunately, at some banks, if you go, and this is why I'm referencing his video. And if I find his video, I'll link it in the description as well. Where one of his friends is having hard time to pull out more than 5,000 US dollars out of a bank. Right? It used to be 10,000 US dollars where they would question it. I don't know why, but I mean it makes sense. Like they can ask you a question, sir, is everything right? Are you being held hostage? Who knows? God forbid. So it's not a problem that they ask. The problem is how they treat you if you do, and you do have a legitimate explanation why you're pulling out, which could be, I just want it out, right? That's a legitimate explanation. So that's the problem, right? That even when you go to Walmart with the self checkout, it's almost always like half of it is shut off. That no cash, now you're gonna be like the dunce people, like you'll be treated like an idiot. No, no, oh, he's using cash, go into the leprosy corner. That is where you use it, and everybody will point at you. It's like social pressure. It's gonna be but also convenience. People are very lazy, and people will most likely, not everyone, not all of the time, but many people give up their freedoms in order to have convenience, right? You and I are now using YouTube. We know it's not a platform that really supports liberty or freedom of speech, but any other platform, if I do, Rumble or whatever, I get like 2 views. Here at least I got 40 for now. So anyway, it's us. We cannot we cannot point to any big entity if we're like, oh, it's their fault if we're serving them with every inch. So I think it's we are at fault. We are giving up our privacy. We are giving up our freedom of speech because of comfort. That's how the saying goes. Good times create lazy people, right, or whatever. And there we are. We are just living in that era. So privacy cryptos. I mean, you don't even have to if they can push cash to be unacceptable. What do you think will happen to privacy cryptos? Unless, of course, there's going to be a major pushback, which I would hope, right? So let me know, what do you think about all what we have said so far, and I'll ask and I'll take some questions from the chat. So thank you everyone for being here and listening through all of that. I will be now reading some of your questions, and we can have a short conversation. All right. Diana asks, Queen's funeral. Do you think they'll use that chance for bank holiday simulation in a bank run prevention? I don't know. That's very speculative, but if I would do it, I would want to use an event like that, and I would want to make a test run for a bank holiday for sure. Yeah, I mean, you never know, of course, but well, let's just say the UK has lost the people in the UK has lost so many freedoms, and I think Cyprus was the biggest test when it came to bail-ins, right? Um, and people just took it. People just took it, and they didn't really care, because it's always just, oh, it's just the millionaires and billionaires they're taking the money away, right? The same with the Russian oligarchs during the pandemic stuff, right? Oh, it's only their yachts, and they deserve it, right? And maybe they do, of course, maybe they do, but it sets a precedence, where if they do it to them, That's how creeping communism works. First, they do it to the people you hate, and then they go closer and closer and closer, and then they do it to everyone else. So it's funny because they used to be the communists, right? Maybe they still are, and more maybe there's just two different branches of it. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a simulation. I don't know the event or anything like that, but it's gonna be a simulation. If the simulation is successful in the sense of you people take it without any um, fighting back, in the sense of at least voicing, your opinions about it at minimum, right? And at maximum, writing to your congressman, right? Then it will happen. The Great FOMO. I like the name. Nice. I finally caught you live. Well, thank you for being here. Do ask a question if you want. When do you think the Fed will pivot? I don't think they're going to be pivoting. I don't think they're going to be pivoting for some time. I think here's what I think. Anything that is going to be a big change where you could blame on someone, it will happen after November, after the voting, or whatever we want to call it, right? Um, After the midterms, because nobody wants you to suddenly realize what's happening, right? It's much always preferred to do it slowly, right? And the Fed pivot, I know, like that would you would think that would actually help um, the labor yeah, the labor force, or hopefully um, you would think that, but I don't think there's enough time to where if they would pivot now, I don't think you would feel the effect of it until November. So I don't think that makes sense for them to pivot now, because it would just only cause an uproar of what's happening. Oh, inflation is going to skyrocket again. Just the thought of it will make inflation skyrocket again, because people now are so afraid of it. So I think they have to slowly continue and pray to God. I would say pray to whoever they pray to, is in order to not to upset anything, and just slowly increasingly uh, fall into the cliff, right? So until November, because even if they pivot now, it might make a couple of jumps, but I think it will upset even more things, because the economy is this flywheel, or they say the comparison of a huge ship. You cannot just turn it immediately and have this result immediately. It will take time. And I would think that from September, I don't think you would see the effect. I think there are much easier, maybe not that legal, but much easier things that they can do regarding news wise, in order to invigorate the voting bases. Let's just say that way. I think they're just hoping nothing will break until November, which is, I think, it's going to be the case, because I don't think they're very honest in the way of current monetary accounting is done, and I think that it would be too easy to just have the Fed show going on one hand, but in the back end still printing money. Of course, not printing, but still making cash available for those who actually are the friends, right? So I don't expect to pivot anytime soon, but eventually they will have to pivot, or they want to go into full on depression. Now, let's just say the Reds get in November, and the economy crashes, and the we will be in a Great Depression number two, right? 2.0. Well, whose fault is it then? Oh, well, it only happened after you guys voted. Now it's your fault, right? So it's really about perception control, and I think perception is set now. They will pivot when human capital no longer asks for a raise. Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand that. Um, why wouldn't they want to ask for a raise? Alexander Levin. Actually, I thought of you just like a week ago. Hello, Arpad, from an anti-veggie. Right, right. Yeah. Well, I would like to maybe listen to some of your opinions about crypto, right? Definitely. I would be interested in that, or not picks, at least maybe picks. I don't know. We're not the crypto channel. And probably this will have very few views because we talked about crypto. But yeah, I would like to know about your opinion. I also looked at some of your stock picks that was under your YouTube videos description, and I liked many of them, and probably even owned them back then, before I even looked at your stock picks, um, and against inflation. So for all of you who don't know, Alexander studied inflation. Let's just say that way, and I listened to a presentation that he made, and he and I agree on many things. All right. How do you think Europe will fare this winter with very little energy? Do you have any insights on that situation from your family in Europe? It's quite interesting. Let's just say the family who is sort of semi well off, they don't care about anything. So they don't care about the news that you and I read. They somehow are still okay, even though, energy has increased, right? And the parts of the family who has been just living on a very modest level, they are absolutely freaked out. They're chopping wood. They're selling the meat. They're cutting the pork. They're doing everything to prepare, absolutely everything, and not in the prepared or prepping mindset. It's just way of living, way of life for them. But now they do it like extra, right? And I don't have to tell them anything for those people, right? I mean, we talk, but they're not necessarily interested in the high big brain monetary speak or CBDCs. They just know from their gut that, okay, we need to have wood, we need to have food, we need to have our pantries full, more so than they were kind of accommodated to. And these are family members who are living outside of city limits and kind of in the Carpathian Basin. And the family members who are, I would say, doing well, they're oblivious to the fact, and they are not interested in anything I have to say. So it's kind of, and I'm assuming, I'm projecting this, but I'm projecting this to the whole of society. It's like Rome. They're drinking wine on the rooftops in Rome while the rest of Rome is burning. In the sense, like, you could probably, I think you saw this famous post or TikTok or whatever, where there's one part, Baltimore, the streets of Baltimore, and it's people are literally on the street sleeping, drugged out of their minds, and they would need help. And there's just Kiev in Ukraine, where people are partying, the ultra rich, in a country where we are sending billions and billions of dollars, right? I'm not I'm not saying like the war should stop and you can send all the money you like, but there's like a discrepancy that we're sending the tax dollars that maybe they have paid some point, and now they're suffering. And um, but it's just kind of crazy to see. But people are still partying in Kiev, while even in other parts of Russia, people are giving their lives on both sides, I guess. So that's the discrepancy. When we went through high inflation or hyperinflation, there was nothing like this. It was I mean, you had the well off, the people who lived well off in communism, but even they suffered after the fall, and people who suffered through communism just suffered more. It wasn't, I mean, maybe I didn't know, or our family just didn't know the ultra wealthy, but um, yeah, it's everywhere. There's the divides are so big everywhere you look, that it's more concerning than the economy collapsing, because then these two sides can be pushed against each other. So yeah, will we still go to hyperinflation if they completely collapse the economy? I would think afterwards. So I would think deflationary event would come first. However, I haven't finished the thought, so I hope if you watched from the beginning, you're still here, because what I wanted to finish the thought would be like the only way how you can stop hyperinflation in its track is with the CBDC, where everyone has to pay for any goods or services only through their central wallet, and but the central wallet is locked. It's maximum amount of $1,000 per month that you can spend on anything, and they can fine tune. Okay, this is the exact amount you can spend on energy. This is the exact same amount on you can spend on X, Y, Z, and so on. So basically, there's a forceful budget put upon your family or you. That way, hyperinflation, as long as the borders, or international commerce is strictly secured, let's just say that way, hyperinflation cannot happen, because there's no physical way of you spending that money. That's one of the reasons, right? When we came into hyperinflation in Romania, the very first things that happened was the closing of the CEC, the central bank, right? Everyone's asset got locked in, because if they would have been able to access that, hyperinflation would have been so fast that not even the inner circle of the elite would have had time enough to liquidate before you guys, right? So they buy time using that strategy for 2 years, 3 years, or something like that, um, in order to get out of the exit door before the rush, right? So, but with the CBDC, you could just, as long as government still has control over this population, you could have that indefinitely, right? Or prolonged period of time. The problem back then was, of course, people used a lot of cash, right? And many settlements were still made in cash, so at least they could use that to their advantage. So at the very first point, or even then, there was a liquidity crisis, because the cash that was stuck in the bank was no longer there. So there was this very short deflation that happened, because you could only use the cash that you had on you, or with your family, or inside your home, or inside the cash registers and so on. It was quite a bit, because a lot of the transactions were still in cash, or if not, they used to write checks, right? So they had that there. But even with that amount, hyperinflation came in, because the wealthy, or the people who did have some access to their um, monetary assets, even that would have been enough to hyperinflate. And we started hyperinflating. By the time my family had access to their cash, then it was all hyperinflated, right? So they could stop with CBDCs and no cash and everything locked in because there's a crisis, and God forbid that crisis could be initiated by an attack, let's just say on a country or whatever, as long as you get the flight or fight response that they want you to have immediately, you'll go along with that. Um, right. Or just an event like the death of a dictator, Ceausescu in our case. So that was a long answer, but even if nothing like that happens, I would assume it's going to be a deflationary event first, because the edge of the empire is sucking up all the liquidity. But I don't think it will last long. I don't think it will last long. In the sense, maybe it will be half a year to 2 years, and after that we could hyperinflate. But by that time, CBDC. We don't really know. I don't think they're going to be successful, by the way, but whatever. We don't really know who decides, at least with the executive branch. No draconian measures will occur until after the midterm elections. Yeah, I would say even then it will be supported by half of the country. um, for some reason, they still want to sell the idea that we are somehow better than Russia or other countries. Sorry I'm late, says Doppelganger. I keep noticing a lot of people are losing confidence in the government. Isn't CBDC's government banking confidence? Government slash banking confidence? The governments in EU keep destroying their policies on purpose, seems so. Everything is on purpose. I mean, in the sense that whatever happening either to this country or that country, I would think it's on purpose. Um, they almost have to burn out all of the old currency in order to introduce a new one, in the sense that they have to, even if you would not lose trust in the currency, you might lose trust in the government, but they have to make you lose trust in the old currency before they can issue in. I mean, CBDCs will be easy in the Zoomer generation who care about TikTok and likes and whatever. But you and I probably would not want to go, or my generation would not want to go full on CBDC. So they have to sell it for the rest of us. So I think confidence is being purposefully eroded in order to roll out CBDC, especially if we're gonna hyperinflate, right? Well, maybe the CBDC will not be hyperinflating. You have quadrillions, trillions and trillions of US dollars flushing about in the system, but they don't have to like immediately say all of the outside dollars is equal to one inside CBDC dollar. I mean, they can just say, oh, we only have 2 billion CBDCs. You gotta get them while it's hot. In fact, they could introduce high interest rate as long as you own it. I mean we don't have to talk about all of the possibilities, but they're gonna be sold. They're gonna be sold to you. Yeah, I agree. Maggie Smith says she agrees with Mark Twain. If voting made a difference, they would have they wouldn't let us do it. How much will the housing market crash? It's going to be exactly 55.62% in some markets, and then 25.26% in other markets, and it's going to be only 5% in some markets, and it's going to be 6.5% in a different market. The issue is with this question, of course, I'm just making light of the situation, but I think Jason Hartman is the guy who says like cyclical markets, linear markets, hybrid markets, blah blah blah. I think it's more. I think that's a working model. I think it's going to be more alongside political lines. I see more and more people who have been strangled by idiocracy in policies, and they want to escape whatever, no matter what they lose on their house, how low they can sell it, and they will sell it in order to get to different jurisdictions where they can enjoy some remnants of their freedom. And those jurisdictions will see larger falls. And if you take a look at where bigger money goes, in the sense of BlackRock and some of these bigger companies where they are purchasing up a lot of real estate, if my knowledge is correct, it's mostly the southern states or states that have not uh, implemented idiocracy. So yet, I don't think they will, but that's my guess. So it really depends on where, what are we talking about? Are you, what index you're talking about, right? So is it the Case Shiller index you're talking about, Case Shiller 20 or whatever, the 20 biggest cities? I think will be huge. It's already big. I mean, if you take a look at some of these cities, that's why I don't invest in those cities, and I'm not interested in moving those. Um, okay, Doppelganger says, I don't like crypto because how could a ledger system have value? Nothing is behind crypto except, and I'm not going to go into this conversation, but I'm going to read your question. Nothing is behind crypto except for energy cons and ledger entries. Why don't we just trade Visa or MasterCard system? Is this a joke? I think it's a joke. But yeah, all money in the current form is just accounting. And you could do your own accounting, you can do ledger accounting, or we could just do accounting in between ourselves and we could use pebbles. It doesn't matter. As long as you and I know exact number of pebbles we have in the system. You know, as long as we have trust. The problem is that trust is eroding, and then we have to go back to something where you don't need trust. That's what the ledger system is trying to achieve, but is being attacked. Jeff Booth is the best when it comes to yeah. Are we spamming here? Let's jump a few questions. Maybe not. Who knows? Okay, hi Arpa. Do you think gold could go down to $1,000? I have a hard time believing that, but it's imaginable. It depends on how big the crash will be, um, because people will have to liquidate whatever they have to liquidate in order to cover um, other things. You know, if you think about housing crash and gold crashing, if you would have both, you know, which one would you sell first? You know, so that might crash bigger in percentage sign. But I feel that gold will have other buyers picking it up, if nothing else, on then on the international stage. So that's why I have a hard time it would go down below, believing it would go down below 1,400. But it's almost, I wish it would go further down, but for other reasons. Yeah, I'm not trying to defend crypto here, but it's different system. When a crypto is backed by something, you introduce trust. Who's backing it? You know, oh, is Arpad backing it? Now you have to trust me. You know, so it's a very different system. You know, it that is good for some things, right? That is very good for some things, where you have a third party where you both trust that third party, and then you can use gold back crypto in order to trade. But ideally, if nothing backs it, then it has no value. There's nothing to confiscate. There's no point of attack, because as long as there's a third party that is, um, you know, guaranteeing its backing, any bigger government or global entity has now a point of attack, right? Um, so basically, as long as you and I, doppelganger, have an agreement and we are men and we have a fair accounting system, then we could do trade with anything. That's one thing that, because it doesn't matter, it's just an accounting system. We do, I mean, banks, right? uh, let's say there's Chase, and let's say there's Bank of America and a bunch of other banks. But if you have an account here and you purchase something from me from here, they just write numbers and they push numbers, right? Nothing actually happens. There's no like cash being moved here. It's just paper. It's another accounting system. It's just physical. There's nothing that changes. And then at the end of the 2 month or 3 month cycle, you just see like how many people from here made transactions to here, how many people made transactions from here to there, and they update the bigger number up top. Like, what's the difference, right? Eventually, they have to settle it, but they could settle it through other banks because this bank has, you know, relationship maybe with a third bank, or Chase has now a negative accounting balance to the third bank, and they can all just figure it out. Everything is just an accounting system. There's no reality anymore. Yeah, nothing backs up USD other than the barrel of the bullet of the US Army on a global scale. It would be so sweet if an EMP hit on Friday. It would not be. That's my opinion. Like in the X Files, destruction. I would be not fond of that. Okay. But an EMP could help you rethink value. You know, what do you value in life? Much of the experiences now is electronic and quote unquote fake or generated, the news included. Right? So yeah. Hi Arpad, linked. What you are saying, will it be possible first web haze hyperinflation and then they propose CBDCs in order to stop it? Originally, that was my very first thought when they introduced the idea of CBDCs. That was my original thought. Since then, I have kind of updated that position um, to the point where they want to um, stop full on hyperinflation. They will let high inflation run. And I think that will be enough for people to jump over to the CBDC ship. I thought that they would have to do a full blown hyperinflation and then offer CBDCs as a solution. That was my initial thought. Right now, that's not exactly what I think, because usually hyperinflation is the way how you make a very, very cheap labor force. And I don't think they need a very cheap labor force here in the US. I mean, unfortunately, right? There's a lot of cheap labor force outside, right, of the US that the global entities can take full advantage of if they want to. And China is doing that with Africa. Right. So technically, if you think about it, the introduction, and there's probably a theory for this, the introduction of cheap labor from the global Chinese market prolonged the upkept fake economy of the Western countries, right? So it prolonged the period of the crash of the Western countries. As long as, because if a light bulb would have to be made in the US, you would already be very poor. You would all be very poor, right? If the car would still need to be made in the US, right? If everything would need to be still made in the US, you would barely be able to afford jeans, right? If you go look at Amazon and you or whatever, and you specifically search for U.S. made jeans, right, that are where the cotton is from here, and everything is from here. Like if that would be the real price that you would have to pay. If we would hyperinflate and the currency relative to other currencies, including Chinese and some other currencies, would be equal, we wouldn't even need to hyperinflate. You know, then we would experience the life experiences what other countries are living through that are actually producing stuff. But we don't even have to hyperinflate in order to achieve that. So I think we would hyperinflate in lack of CBDCs because there's just there would be a loss of currency and a loss of faith in government at the same time. And we're peaking, we're going to that peak. So something needs to be introduced in order to avert that. What would you spend your money on today knowing what's coming? Very good question. So I cannot say like what I'm spending, or I cannot give advice, right? I'm not giving financial advice, but I can tell you what I looked at. So basically, the theory is of the empire, how they collapse, right? It's usually the edge of the empire that collapses, and you have some time until Rome collapses, right? But when it collapses, and everyone at the edge of the empire is trying to rush in, see immigration, right, into the US. Everyone is trying to rush in here. Eventually, when it collapses, the central might be the worst part to be in after it collapses because they have more to lose. The relative fall is much bigger. Relative fall in Lebanon, right? It's not that big. I mean, people might starve, don't get me wrong, but there are some are already starving. There's very few people, and of course, comments will come out, but there's very few people relative to Lebanon, how many people are starving here. So the relative fall will be much bigger here than there, right? So now, if you are in the US, especially in the US, which I named the center of the empire, you could take advantage of this time difference between the edge falling and the center falling. So I looked at like what other assets can I buy from where the edge is falling, right? Because I still have relative good purchasing power to compared to someone in Turkey, someone in Romania, someone in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. So naturally, I looked at the parts of the world that I know and I have been, right? And I looked at real estate there because you would think, let's very simple example, the euro, right? It hasn't like crashed yet, but it fell to the point where it's on parity with the US dollar. It used to be much higher. So I looked at real estate that I could purchase that would be much cheaper for me now, paying with dollars, than I would buy in Eastern Europe, where they are using euros or some other currencies, even better, right? So you would think that if the euro crashed 30% compared to the US dollar, the real estate that would be um, listed in euros, right, would have stayed the same, and now it'd be 30% cheaper to buy up assets. And that is true in some limited cases, but not most of the time. What has actually happened is real estate stayed the same or on parity with the dollar, and actually the euro fell. So what happened is not that the real estate in Eastern Europe got cheaper for me, you know, if I have US dollars, it just got even higher to people who make euros, right? So what that means is that we experienced a real estate inflation or superinflation, whatever, in the last couple of years. They have experienced that even more. So when it comes to affordability of houses or housing, compared to the rest of the world, we're actually still doing good. That means to me that we still have um, we still have to fall in order to get on parity, where everything basically the world got cut shaved off like 30%. So we haven't been there yet. We are experiencing this slowly, right? That was the inflation part. Now it's a deflation part. So technically, you would want to buy, of course, I don't know what you want to buy, but I would want to buy stuff where I can take advantage of this time and buy stuff from the rest of the world that after the crash, after the collapse, whatever, during the collapse, I can sell back to them, right? Or if the center falls more, then I have some assets on the outside perimeter in places where they didn't go fully Mad Max, right? There's still some civilization left because you want to take advantage of your relative strong dollar compared to the rest of the world. So I looked for and far beyond what could be done. And it comes down to it's very hard to find anything because um, it turns out that most of the assets, even on the underdeveloped world and developed world and whatever you can find every far corner of the world, they're actually more tracking the dollar instead of tracking their local currency, right? So this dollar system is persuasive. It's like a tentacles reaching everywhere. And if the dollar is getting stronger, their assets are getting stronger. It's getting harder on them, right? Because we're still at the collapse of the edge phase. So what do you buy? I cannot tell you what to buy, but what I found was you have to think about assets um, that are listed in dollars everywhere originally or by default, right? So technically, like oil, if it's getting the barrels of oil, which has a global price, if it's getting worse and worse for us, that means for someone who has inflating currency that has is worse than the dollar, it's even getting worse for them, right? So now you have to watch for global priced assets that are still not overvalued that the edge of the empire, might want later, right? And there's very few of those. Of course, you probably guessed one of those could be gold because it has a global price, right? And once their local currency collapses, they rush to the dollar. But once dollar will collapse, and there would be no CBDCs, they'll have to go further and further. And that's how we get to the Exeter pyramid, the inverted pyramid of everything just crashing down to um, what will survive a full on societal collapse. So it's very hard, but that's the kind of logic where I try to work out what would be good to invest in. I hope that makes sense. What happens when nobody buys our bonds anymore? The value is in the tech that goes with it. I guess that's the crypto. The bonds, yeah. Well, the buyer and spender of last resort, right, is the central bank. We would need to transfer all our debt from outside debt to inside debt, which with debt, which would actually be much better because we would owe the money to ourselves. The issue is the old world countries do that and Japan. So I don't know what ramifications that would have. But technically, like Switzerland actually is somewhat similar. Like they have a high debt to GDP, but who owns the debt, right? That's the bigger question. So technically, I don't know if bonds make any sense anymore. Everything is like taxes and bonds are very old world. Um, Taxes are no longer what you think they are. It used to be that meant revenue, but now it's just punishing mechanism or an incentive mechanism to make sure that you behave in the way the government wants you to behave. Just the other day, I was looking at airplane tickets, right? And now it says like how much carbon footprint or whatever you get, carbon points, whatever you get if you take this air ticket or the other air ticket, or if this has like whatever flight and that has other flight. So whatever taxes are now, it's not what you think they are. And bonds, I'm pretty sure the same. Nothing has the old traditional sense anymore. We are in clown world. Deflation is what? Yeah, deflation is worse. As for a country, that's why they usually try to go with inflation. Inflation actually usually helps countries in debt. I think about change. So Sam says, I think about changing euro for dollar. Wait for the euro to collapse and then hopefully get more dollars. But could this really work? Yeah, I tried to play the euro to dollar to Swiss franc game. I was never able to time it right, and I didn't have the uh, the patience to wait out for the next bull cycle of the other currency. So I'm not gonna attempt it now. But I would think what you could do is like very simple. If you are in the US, you could probably have much cheaper vacations now in Europe, because I'm assuming not all costs have been risen with the US dollar. Consumer goods made in Europe, or that sort of stuff, or even the hospitality in Europe. But I'm thinking bigger asset classes like real estate and some other stuff and energy and everything else is actually much worse for them than for us. And Sam, I think you're talking about getting dollars with your euro. That's the exact same mentality that I was talking about, the edge of the empire, which of course Europe is pretty center, but everyone flocking in to the center, just like how the same thought pattern that you said. Maybe it's better to have dollars. Maybe it's better to have dollars. It's better probably for a while, until something else happens. Then it's not anymore. The Great FOMO. Such a nice label or name. I noticed the same. I was looking at real estate in Zimbabwe just for fun, and they just list all their homes in USD instead of their own currency. So it's not any cheaper. Yeah, I was looking at Lebanon. Like, Lebanon is beautiful. One of the most beautiful countries would be Lebanon. And you would think, well, if it's crashing or if it's hyperinflating, wouldn't it be nice to own some, real estate at the Mediterranean Sea, And it turns out nothing really crashed. It was their currency, right? It's the currency that crashes, not the real estate. What happens though is that the labor force does get cheaper, but they don't have to sell the real estate, right? They don't have to sell their real estate. Actually, their real estate is being now paid off in cheaper dollars, cheaper local currency. So if they had $100,000 worth of debt in order to buy their old real estate, and that was a 30-year-old mortgage in their local currency, now with 10,000 local currency buying a loaf of bread, it makes it actually easier to pay off their real estate, right? Because hopefully their mortgage was locked in. So the real estate price can track the inflation here in the US, no problem. The issue is now they would not be able to buy new houses. So what that does stop new buildings from being built, which might actually make the problem worse for them. Um, yeah. So what does I'm assuming so now you made me think through this, but yeah, probably labor force. I mean, if you want, you could hire people from Zimbabwe now cheaper than you could have done for like 2 years ago. If their inflation is worse than the US, which they might not be. Sounds like the US should get ready for 35 Big Mac meal. I think so. I think so. But remember the cycles that we talked about, the waves, right? So after we go through the hyperinflational waves, right? Or you could say Kondratyov waves or whatever. But the sequence of waves, and one of the last things will be wages, right? So once we go that, and I think now they could implement more and more states or cities are implementing a $25 minimum wage, $35 minimum wage, $62 minimum wage. You can do whatever. It doesn't make it's just a accounting system. Um, in the big, of course, it would help the people who get the immediate raise for the next 2 years, but not much after that. After it had been seeped through the economy. So once that happens, I don't know if $35 will be enough for a Big Mac. Maria says, "Hi Arpad. I've listened to your answer, and I don't get to understand how they will be able to handle inflation only in high inflation and avoid entering to hyperinflation. Thank you." Well, I said that that would be only with CBDCs. So basically, if you have no cash at all and all the money is locked into the banks, and your bank only allows only a certain amount of dollars to be released per day. There's no physical way how you can spend more because everything is done now through apps and cards and whatever, everything is digital. So it will just deny your purchase after a while. Oh, you have reached your carbon credit. You you bought two Big Macs. That is equal to 2 kilograms of smoke in order to make the burgers. You have been denied your third burger, right? So that way, there's no hyperinflation because you cannot spend more, right? Hyperinflation is the cause of you want to spend all the money all at once because you know tomorrow it will buy less burgers. But if you physically cannot spend it, what happens then is, of course, a black market of other currencies. That's why we talked about privacy cryptos and cash and other stuff at the beginning of the video. I hope this explains it, but I can do another ex- try of explanation if that didn't clear it up. Yeah, Iraqi dinar should be revalued soon. Maybe with free and independent Iraq. I don't know. Is there really a silver squeeze? Silver and gold are still the best thing to be in, according to Sammy, even though I own some Bitcoin. I don't know if there's gonna be a squeeze. I kind of don't know. I think silver is the most underrated asset in the world. I do agree with that. Silver is definitely technology wise is needed, and it's gonna be needed more and more in my opinion. I don't believe in squeezes anymore because with AMC or whatever the stock was, they can just stop you trading it. If they really want to, then they can just stop you trading it. So with all the papering over, they can do anything. It's just numbers on screens. What might happen is, I don't know if this is the squeeze you're talking about, is the premium of physical silver being more than the cost of the coin. That can happen. I can totally see that happening. So basically, you or there's none available. Oh, the price of this coin is $25. Plus, you have to do $75 premium in order to get it, because actually the price is what the price is. You can name it premium, bonium, whatever, it doesn't make sense, right? The price is what you have to pay out of your pocket. It's just an illusion to make you think the silver is cheaper. No, it's not, because you cannot get it. Try doing it through the LBMA, see if you end up with any silver afterwards. So at some point in Romania, we stopped looking at prices because there was a number price in the newspaper for everything, and there was an actual price, a street price. So we called it the divorce, right? The divorce, or the splitting of prices. Okay, Vietnam is crypto friendly and food is still grown and sold by the locals. Non-violent citizens, cheap prices, low rents, beautiful women. There you go. Really no downside except quality of water. I'll just bring my own water. Yeah, to be honest, thank you. That's really good information. I haven't really checked out, although I have a friend in Vietnam, and maybe I need to reconnect with him. Yeah, I haven't really thought about Vietnam. It's definitely, full of people who know how to resist, or used to be. Who knows what happened since then? They got Japanified. I don't know. Do you see the World Economic Forum achieving their "you will own nothing and be happy" ideal in some countries? I think there there are Western European countries who would love this right now. Most of the people, if not right now, in 20 years, in the sense of the newer generation, they don't want to own anything. It's our failure. It's our failure to pass on the will for freedom. And unfortunate that some real estate investors are pushing for this anyway. Um, or I guess YouTube investors, like, oh, it's good, it's all fine, everything will. People are renting the clothes on their back, and this is fine. And you should invest in more and more apartments and pods and coffins that people can live in, because they're going to be choosing that anyway. And I don't subscribe to that. I like real estate, but I don't think people should own hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of real estate and be a drag on people actually owning their dream home or living in a home in one point at their life. I don't subscribe to that disaster capitalism or whatever they call it. And yeah, I would rather do something else. Yeah, so I do believe they will achieve it to some degree in some countries for sure, like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and wherever the test was successful, if you know what I'm talking about. Maria says, okay, now I understand. Well, that is what I wanted to read. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so it was not successful though in Romania, but we had more freedom after the fall of communism in Romania than what we are projected to have now in the Western hemisphere 10 years from now, to be honest. Yes, Mr. E says, hit the like button, folks. Yes, please do. Sammy says, yeah, but look what happened to nickel. It went from 55 to 110. So 55,000 to 110. That is why I own physical instead of paper. Well, yes, if you own paper, you own paper. And if you own physical, you own physical. It's difference, the world of difference between the two. We just take it for granted that it's the same because you have exposure to it. You don't have exposure to anything. you have exposure to speculation, right? I think with oil, if you want to trade commodities, right, you have to be able to physically hold the oil commodity. Um, I don't know why that's not true with any other commodity that is being used. Um, it should be. Then it would be no speculation. Well, I know there would be, but you could buy ETFs or whatever. The fact of the matter is, people want to speculate, and they will find ways how to speculate, and they will get what they deserve. The paper to physical on the death clock just shooting upward. Could you send me a link in the comment section, or no, ask, write what should I Google in order to find that? I would like to see where the paper to physical. Oh, now I see Mr. E has the icon of Wall Street silver. That's why so many silver questions. Yeah, of course, I like silver. So, and I do listen to some of their interviews. Very, very engaging. I love that, and thought provoking. Yeah. Yeah, if you can send me a link or something to Google in order to find the death clock, but I'm sure I'm gonna find it. The treasury market slowed down. Yes, I haven't really looked up that much, but that's what I've like through the headlines. That's it is concerning. The treasury market. So Sammy says the treasury market slowed down half of more than half of its production of silver. They announced it to the other day, at least in the United States. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. I would think they would want to push the price down. So I don't see why would do it on purpose. I think the markets are breaking. Um, here's how. Here is how you will know the market has already broken, but you don't feel it yet. Is by pushing out the time frame of when you order something and when it gets delivered. So the same with under the pandemic, if you ordered an AC unit and you had to wait, 6 months, 10 months, 9 months in order to get it, that means that the supply chain was completely broken, purposefully halted, right? But that means there's a big problem. What they didn't do yet is, okay, well, technically, if you really want an AC, you could just buy it off of my house, right? You could come to me and I could say, oh, you want it right now? Here, I'll give you mine, right? In the sense of normal markets, price would need to indicate that, okay, something is getting more and more scarce. But if there are shenanigans, you can just say, no, no, it's the same price. You'll just get it later. You'll just get it later. Well, eventually, there's no more later. Eventually, will be, oh, you can order silver. Yeah, yeah, sure. The price is $25 per ounce or whatever, and you'll get it 2 years from now. And to be honest, I've seen something like that already happen where it's months. You order something, yeah, yeah, of course, you'll get it in 6 months, and eventually they get it. And this is how they kind of manage spikes, and somehow they find liquidity, right, for the physical, or I don't know where they pull it out from. But eventually, I mean, this is good for spikes, but eventually this period will be so long that there will be no physical at all. It will be, even the physical will be just a promise. Oh yeah, yeah, you'll get it in 2 years. So that is something to be watched. And yeah, I mean, I hope you get it, and that's normal. Sometimes normal where you're or especially if you're making or large orders, right? That's normal that you have to wait. We'll source it for you, and so on and so forth. Well, eventually, the source it for you will be, oh, we'll just send back the money in 2 years. We couldn't source it. So that will happen to physical in my, that's my guess. Do you follow Shmita cycles? I believe it in September 26th, and new one starts 27th. It's gonna be a jubilee. I don't follow them. I know about them. But yeah, a jubilee doesn't necessarily mean a jubilee for you. But it would be interesting to see if the funeral of the queen does actually mean a jubilee. Does she release all the dead slaves? I don't know. I think not. There are jubilees though. It's just not necessarily for you and I. It's for the banks. So you have to understand how the feudal system never went away. It just came back in a different way. It's now you just get to be on a ladder. The ladder got very long. It used to be the lords, right? The feudal lords, and then the peasants, the free peasants, and then the serfs. Well, now the free peasants can own serfs, and the serfs can own serfs, and the serfs can do TikTok videos, but then they can shoot up to be entertainers and whatever. So, of course, I'm joking here, but um, that doesn't mean necessarily that the full ladder will get a jubilee, right? Some people don't think of you as human, unfortunately. So why would they give you a jubilee? But traditionally, you could only keep a slave for 7 years, right? And debt, whatever. You could only pay off debt for 7 years, and that's it. That was kind of a. If you listen even to old Hungarian folk tales, which you should, and if you have kids, then there are YouTube videos, 100 YouTube videos of old Hungarian folk tales, which were very nicely translated into English, and they teach kids values. But even there, the story goes that the poor man's son goes to serve the king for 7 years, and after 7 years, he goes back, right? And so on and so forth. So 7 year cycle is very known among the ancient world everywhere, not just the Shmita. So yeah, it's interesting to see. I would thank you. Well, thanks for the comment. It's a very good topic, and I'm sort of interested. I just don't have high hopes. But yeah, we'll see. So the great FOMO says doppelganger that falls in line with the Vatican calling all church assets to be sent to the Vatican by September 13th. Yes, I've even looked at the original letter in Latin. um, I learned Latin in school. I forgot most of it, but Romanian is actually quite close to Latin. It's a Latin language, Italian, Romanian, Spanish. So yeah, it's all filled with BS. Why they need to call it back, but they are calling back all the assets to the Vatican, and we'll see why. I'm assuming if there would be, and this is all speculation and hearsay and allegedly and so on, but I'm assuming if there would be a bank freeze in the U.S., the Vatican would not want their assets to be in the U.S. Sorry, UK. If there would be a bank freeze in the UK, the Vatican would not want their assets to be in the UK. I don't necessarily think there will be a full-blown bank freeze, but things are turning. It's out the this you sent out the cash, the money to grow, right, and then you harvest. So it's harvesting time. I hope that only is. I hope that is only monetary, and not like when there was this harvest festival in Las Vegas or whatever. Mood cycles, man. Jeez, just stay at home. Paper to silver ratio is going 5 every week right now. Okay, it's gonna break unless they stop it and then think of something else. Right. During hyperinflation, how did it impact children while going to school? At some point we stopped. We stopped going to school. Um, Not for long though. Not for long. And eventually, the government paid you to go back to school. So basically, the parents got money, which of course only made hyperinflation worse because it was. Think about, you only get UBI if your children go to school, to government institutions, of course. So that is how it was fixed eventually. Fixed. And they made presents and you got checks. And with an interview with Maneko, I kind of explained that. But basically, they had to pay people to send their children to school, and that kind of helped them buy food. I wonder if they even went to school. Yeah. Eventually, they went back, or we went back, financially incentivized. Yeah. Crypto hodler says he lost 25K trading silver. Never again. Go against the JP Morgan bots. Yeah, I lost money trading silver as well. That's why I don't trade it anymore. I made money, then I lost most of it. Silver futures, 5x. Yeah. I've always wondered why they never do, and if they do, let me know. They never do 2x leverage, just a 2x leverage on gold. Like, my assumption is not financial advice. This is just fun time we're having, the 51 of us, right? If they would have a 2x on gold, it's, my opinion is that it's very rare that silver gold goes down 50% immediately or very fast, right? So that means, right, you would not really lose your investments unless it would go down further than 50%. But any gain on the upside, you would double, right? I mean, you double both on the downside and the upside, but hopefully it would never go down on the 50% of its current value. And but if it does go up 100-fold, you would get 200-fold of profit, right? I wonder if that is why they never do a simple 2x on gold, because it's, you could just hold it forever and you could just sell it when you're in profit. Because gold investors, I'm assuming, if they're buying physical, they are holding it for the very long term, perhaps to their grandchildren or grandchildren's grandchildren, so they don't have to sell it, right? You're only investing gold. I'm assuming that you never want to sell, so you could just have that continuous 2x of growth, but not really care about anything. But I do, of course, 100x or 10x or something like that on silver, which is more volatile anyway. Um, it's all to fleece the JP Morgan types, fleece the rest of us. So I'm not prepared to play it anymore as well. Wealth transfer into silver will be once in a lifetime, so buy and hodl. Yes, I agree. In the sense that in our lifetime, yeah, they will come again after the next empire and the next empire and the next. Eventually they all fail. They start out with silver, then they go into paper, then crypto, then nothing, then probably telekinesis or something uh, in the future, and then it all falls back. So I think in our lifetime, yes. Did you see the German Chancellor misspeaking and saying we would all remember where we were in September 24th, 2022? No, I have not. He meant to say February 24th, day of the start of Ukraine war. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I said like, yeah. No, I have not, but that's an interesting date. Yeah, does nukes start flying? I don't know. There was this South African, um, I don't know what to call him, like a fortune teller or whatever, who saw the future, right? And he predicted the Third World War will be between Germany and Russia. And I think he's the one who talked about like people holding devices in their hands and whatever. I've only saw a brief video of his predictions, and of course, I know they always kind of make everything true. He probably predicted a bunch of stuff that wasn't true, but he did say, right? And I wonder if the dates are correct. So it's always interesting to think about. But there was a South African, yes, a South African, a Boer, I believe, Boer, or I don't know how they pronounce it, um, guy who was, I guess, in and out of consciousness and traveling into the future and whatever. That's the claim, anyway. And I find all of this stuff, plus the ancient architects and all of the interesting stuff, quite amazing. Jim says he sold his silver collect. Oh, I sold my silver collected over my youth in 1973, Hunt Brothers, and paid my college. Retired at 31. Good for you. Wow, nice. Well, I think you might be able to do that again. I don't know. If not, that was pretty good. I hope the college degree you actually used, or you could have just waited for Biden to to just say, "Oh, you don't owe anything," just right before we hyperinflate, and debt would have been inflated away anyway. Of course, this is just all joke, but I'm glad you were able to do that. Maybe you have something for us, as in the silver trading tips. I would gladly read your next comment. Ahmed's wife asks, "Hi, I was wondering if anyone is noticing the produce quality going down." And yes, for me, that's a yes for this part. Some items good on outside, rotten inside. As a mom, I'm expecting this as a canary in coal mine. Well, I wouldn't say quite rotten, but I did see the ingredients change. I just wrote it off as inflation, or they are trying to save money on the production line. But some products that I used to buy, I no longer buy because the trust is no longer there. So the quality of the products, it's very old news that the shrinkage of the package size, people know about that, of course. I hope you know, right? That's one way to hide inflation, is to higher than normal inflation, is to make smaller packages, or the contents of the packages get smaller. The price stays the same, so there's no inflation on paper. However, there is, right? And that also means that sometimes the produce qualities goes worse and worse and worse, for many reasons, because it might not be the end amount in the package that gets smaller, but some ingredients are now left out. And that has been going back to AC units. That has been the problem with AC units. The ones that they rushed out after the pandemic, they're all banned. And now you probably have AC unit issues if you have purchased them during the pandemic time or around that time. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same with cars and everything else. And not just that, they would hire anyone who could fog a mirror. So, yeah, it's gonna be a third world very soon, in the sense of products and the product qualities. That's very sad. Why do you think CBDCs will not succeed? I mean, it's up on us, you know. I mean, what does success mean to you? uh, so, is success where a full blown total control is implemented? I think that will not succeed. The issue is it doesn't have to succeed as long as it succeeds with 90% of the people. That's enough for you to live in a SHIT world because everyone else is living in that world. In the sense of how many of you are using YouTube, right? How many of you are using Google products, right? If you are using a Google Gmail, you're already in the system, right? I can have a Proton Mail account, but if you're using a Google, if you're using a Google email, there's not no private conversation that we cannot have that, right? So as long as they get a mass that's big enough to use it, that's good enough to implement total control. They don't have to, get out the lash and whip to the last person. Although I think the way things have been going on with this administration, that they might try that. So I think it will not succeed because of human nature, and there will be always this core that will resist, and eventually will fail. But I do believe in many of these countries that I said about the other question. I think they will partially succeed, or to a very high degree it will succeed. But I do believe there are these younger anarcho types who will outsmart the system, and they will provide next to good solutions for all of the rest of us. It's just, I don't know if we want to use those or not. So, right now, you can still be private on the internet in the sense of having fake identities that you are truly fake. um, but it's very hard to keep that up, right? It's very hard to do that. There are services, there are networks, there are high tech stuff that you can do right now where none of the tracking would apply. There are de-googled phones and everything. So, but that's fine. They can track them different ways, and they can assume guilt immediately as long as they find you using those services, which they do. I'm assuming. So there are ways that how you can go, but now your IQ has to be higher and higher in order to go around the system. When the system was very benign and simple, the average person with just a couple of tricks could outsmart it. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. There's going to be young blood, young anarcho types who will outsmart the system because that's how they are. And that's the nature of the sun archetype. And as soon as they somehow divorce from the current system, eventually they will provide solutions. So of course they know it will fail. The trick is to make CBDC so convenient to use to everything else that you don't want to use it. That's how you can apply it. That's how they tricked us to many of the stuff that we have since the 9/11 stuff. So I think they will succeed to some degree, but not to full, and eventually they will completely fail, because um, well, more than not just one thing, but one thing is that eventually only dumb people, to be honest, will be in these control grids, in the sense they will be running the control grids. When we had communism in Romania, eventually none of the smart cool kids wanted to be in government, because it was, even though the facade was it's so great to serve the dictator and so on, none of the actual people who were self-driven wanted to do that, right? And then that's how all these jokes and all of the stuff started off, where um, jokes about like the stuff that Reagan used to say and whatever, how they made fun of anyone who worked for the government, even though that was not true, and they clamped down on many stuff. But culturally, the youth turned away from the control system, and they provided us with the next generation of growth. So eventually, any control system will fail because one, no one who's smart and cool wants to be part of it, right? Um, and we'll talk about the rest. I don't want to take too much time, but it will fail. You just have to live through it a bit. Right. For example, yeah, the CEC bank, which did lock in all of the currency in Romania, right? But people went around it, and the smart people who were somewhat prepared for the event. There's data showing that for every 1 ounce of gold, there's 100, 300 ounces of paper gold. Yes. So kind of translated to 1 to 100 leverage. That's not the leverage I'm talking about. And bankers get caught manipulating and spoofing metals market. That's dilution. I wouldn't say leverage. That's dilution. Or the paper is leveraged into silver. You could say that, yes. Or the silver is diluted into paper. What I was saying about is that tickers, futures market tickers, where if I buy 1 ounce of paper gold or paper silver, then I get loaned another amount for um, to have 2 ounces of gold in order to trade that, right? So yeah, food is the best money. Well, probably not tomatoes; they rot fast. But as a barter item, I agree. Japan yen dropping versus the dollar. Is it edge of empire? Yes, James. That is what I consider edge of empire. Even though Japan is not like out in the edge, many of these African countries and Middle Eastern countries and Eastern European countries are sort of the edge of the empire. I would have considered Japan closer to the center. So basically, the center being the US, around that being Europe, Canada, Australia, all of these Western styled countries, including Japan. But I think Japan is dealing with its own issues, and they were able to prolong their inflation because the population had a totally different mentality of saving money, right? They bought the propaganda hook, line, and sinker, right, for many long decades. And they were able to prolong to the point where even some people said, I remember quite well, that the Japanese currency is deflationary. And I said, no, it's not. It's more. They have more than yesterday, and they have more than the year before, and so on and so forth. But is it the growth? Like, can their economy growth kind of contain that? And I concluded no, but they said, no, no, you just don't understand Japanese culture. And they were true. I don't quite understand Japanese culture, but I don't think they can prolong it that way. So now it's that tsunami, sorry, Japan, that has been building up, and now it's being unleashed. I still think Japan will do okay as a country, but their savings and their people are being washed away. Unfortunately, it's because they didn't want to upset their own system. They just believed in their system, so now they have to pay that price. Unfortunately. because I think Japan as a country is, I have a lot of respect for the Japanese people, right? But what government in their late stage of empire ever wanted to help their people? So Jim says helped start the school for troubled youth. 240 boys got real education. Well, thank you, Jim, for doing that. I'm pretty sure you, assuming the real education you mean what I'm thinking you mean, I'm pretty sure you saved lives, to be honest. And not just those boys, right? So, I wonder what type of school. But that's good money put to good use. Mystery, do you guys want to go for another 10 minutes? And then we say our goodbyes, I guess, because there's some more questions. Was there always food for people with gold and silver in Romania during hyperinflation, like in Venezuela right now? Yeah, I spoken about this extensively. The idea was you didn't want to sell your gold and silver at all. You would rather trade your skills, you would rather work on a farm for food and have gold somewhere stashed away, or buried away, because you didn't know how long it will be, the whole system, the whole hyperinflation. And just because, let's say, gold goes up 1,000 fold tomorrow, will you sell it? You may, right? And then the day after tomorrow, another 500,000, it goes up. So when do you sell it? It's very hard to say. And people who are down to everything, they have already sold anything, they would at least have that gold that they could take after they have lost their house, after they have lost their everything. They could at least use that and even flee the country with it. So in some cases, gold or silver would be much better for storing away pre-hyperinflationary wealth through the period, if you can somehow to survive after, to the point after the hyperinflationary event, and then maybe rebuy some of the stuff that you have lost, right? So you would not want to trade it away for food, but you could, to answer the question, you could. It's just it was dangerous. So it was, you would have be it would be foolish and dangerous to go with coins or bars or anything like that in order to say you now have nothing else, and you just go, okay, give me some food. Like, what is the price they're going to pay? One, and will they assume you have more, right? Do you have your uncles and your cousins and your brothers up in guns, and that's how you trade? You could do that. People did that, not necessarily with guns, right? But that's how we even traded currency. Like there was a strategy how to do that, right? That is why I'm assuming you haven't watched previous videos, but that is why you had multiple wedding rings, right, or chains, where you could use the links as for one transaction, or wedding bands that you would fake that's your own wedding band that you would sell. And then you would at least have the assumption of safety. Well, you have no more, that was your wedding band that you sold, right? So there are tricks and tips how you can trade that. I would say yes, but it could be a stupid bet. I'm sorry to say that, because right now a can of whatever, let's say, um, Campbell soup, right? Campbell soup, I don't know how many you get for an ounce of silver, right? Well, it might both go up, right? It might both go up 1,000 fold, right? Now you're doing that for the same ratio, or even worse, maybe you're getting one can less now for the soup. And the house prices and the land prices, the equipment prices, labor price, everything else is still down here. Wouldn't it be better to use the silver or gold to purchase something else that is um, absolutely crushed in value? Wouldn't you want to have? Wouldn't you would have been better if you stored both Campbell's soup and silver, or even then, beyond the Campbell soup side of the trade, where you do the Campbell soup still to silver, wait for another couple of years if hyperinflation is still going to go up in like we had, or the sort of like 6 7 7 years of hyperinflation. Eventually the first part of it, food, is going to be very scarce because how much food you have in your pantry, how much your neighbor has, and so on and so forth. Once that's gone, food will be more valuable than silver. Eventually, the all the smart people with all the assets, everything has been crushed, including cryptos and real estate, and your app that you think you trade stocks on, which are just numbers, is no longer working. Eventually, they move into silver and gold. Then it goes up, right? So that's why I was talking about the waves. So you want to ride some waves and then use your assets to the best of your advantage. Of course, if you're not prepared, you're just trying to get by, at least you have that, what people in Venezuela had. So yes, the answer is yes, but the story goes very deep. All right. Also, did more pawn shops open to collect people's precious metals for currency so they could buy food to eat? We would have trading places for currency and gold and silver. These would be guys who would be known by the community. They were shady people, to be honest, but they were trustworthy in the sense that you would know you're actually going to get real currency or real gold, right? We didn't have the tradition of coin shops or anything like that. But so these guys, kind of the black market filled for that gap, and they would have bodyguards, right? So you would know them, and for them, it wouldn't have been worthwhile to scam you, because the long term they could do better profit, right, on exchange rates for longer term, and they would have like local police and everyone paid off, so they could run this. Eventually, this became very semi-legal, and they just built their own buildings or rented their own places and did it there, even though it wasn't like fully legal. And it became safer and safer. But there were also these traveling ones that you could do, who would offer you better price or exchange rates, but they would often scam you. And we almost got scammed. My family almost got scammed, but like after living through a couple of years of hyperinflation, like with all the crime and everything going on, you are become very like suspicious of everything. So I remember this story where we were exchanging foreign currency, right? And we didn't really exchange gold at that point, but it was foreign currency, and I know it was Romanian lei, Hungarian forint, and US dollars. I don't know exactly what was there, but like the things how this would play out, you would have at least four people coming, right? And possibly other people as well. But you would never, nobody would know like who has the money, right? Because if you're going there, you could be spotted or whatever. So ideally, you would even take routes different anyway. So they get there, my mother and my father and my uncle and my cousin and myself and my sister, but we were further back. So it was a stack of currency because hyperinflation in some countries hyperinflated more than others. But it was a stack of currency. It was quite okay. Like it was larger bills. The amount was good enough, I remember. And my mother used to count currency very fast. I'd never seen anyone count faster currency than her ever since then. But she would fold it and double it, and she would count, and it would go okay. And she would fold it again, and it would be counted. Then you would know that's how it was. So anyway, looked good, and I think the guy offered like, oh, a rubber band or something, or he wanted to exchange it. I don't know what the excuse was, but he had a folder or something, and the currency was on top, right? And he did something after my mother counted it, right? And the currency was on top, like like a stack of cash, right? And I don't know what was the excuse, but as soon as she handed it back for something, he just flipped it, right? And on the other side of the folder, the same similar amount of stash or same amount of stash. I don't know, it was prepared or like prepared earlier. I don't know. It was like the exact same. The top layer, everything was that, but in the middle it was a bunch of paper. It was cut up fake paper or fake printed currency, right? It looked like it on the edges, but it was fake. So as soon as they gave it back to my mother to take it away, she was like, you have to count it again because it's not the same currency, right? So she immediately counted it, and they were exposed that they were trying to fake us, right? So that was one. There were multiple events, but this was, I think, is almost like ingenious from their part. It was just like, yeah. So that was one of the cases where we were trying to being scammed. But that's why you would have like trust with some people, that okay, you're gonna do business. And we had like four of these people that we trusted, right, in the city that where we lived during hyperinflation. There were more, of course, but these guys we trusted, and they never scammed us. Of course, as much as you could, you would just do it between family. Okay, you need this amount of currency, you need gold, what do you need? And you would have come to agreement, like extended family, cousins, wives, cousins, and so on, as much as you could. But everyone was poor, and who were not, they had to do business. So it wasn't easy. There's a lot of intricate details that you have to know how to trade under these situations. We should talk more with people from Venezuela and South America. Yeah, it's very different in other countries because we didn't have, like, the crime rate was bad, but the level of violence wasn't as bad as in South America. So for us, like, this didn't mean that somebody had to be whacked, as long as, okay, they got exposed. Like, there was like some points there after that where it could have gotten wild, but it didn't. Like, everyone got back their original cash and their original amount, and that was it. It was done in a civilized manner. But yeah, so these traveling tradesmen were kind of vicious. All right. Yeah, I'm probably gonna skip a few questions here. If you have any question, write question or capital Q or something, and write the question. I'm just gonna take one or two more. Okay. I will sell my gold when I can buy 5 acres with a gold coin. I like that. That's a good measure. That I did say in some of my previous videos, you have to have your amounts and prices in your head, and if you can do that, it's a good trade because you will never be able to um time the top or the bottom. So where you think it's fine, it's good. But I would say watch out for the political stuff, because I think the crash and whatever is coming will not be similar to the crash we had or hyperinflation we had in the 90s, but more than what my grandmother used to talk about for me about the hyperinflation that she went through. She went through multiple, but very early on when communism actually came to Romania, right? So when communism came to Romania, my grandfather was a farmer, and he had a lot of land and even rented land that he worked on with steam engines, by the way. And he was eventually punished for owning land. And anyone who owned more than around 2.5 acres was taken away, both the person and the land. I'm not going to go into gruesome details, but that's one of my grandfathers. So you have to watch out. Maybe it's a good trade, but maybe they're fooling you with that trade. You have to watch out. And that's why I tell the story about the butcher and the farmer. And the butcher, even during that time, got a bunch of gold and got out of the country instead of trying to make it with his acres. Right. James says, I like the wave theory. Currently, housing has dropped 8% in Phoenix this last quarter. I think it's still waves. Used cars falling as well. Yet another stuff like food is still inflating away. Yeah, so food was, I think, the fourth in the theory, right? That I when I wrote my, I didn't even write. I never published the theory. I just put it in the video. But yeah, food is quite late. Um, Usually it's raw materials first, then the stuff you build from raw materials, including eventually housing, but then tools and other stuff that goes up. Uh, Basically, copper, everything you made from copper, the copper wires in the house, so the house price has to go up, and so on and so forth. Eventually, food will go up, right? Food will have to go up, and then wages will have to go up. But now the wages are in. So if you caught the first wave, then people who are now either subsidized by government or wages went up, because it's the same. We want relative value, right? It's either one asset is being subsidized by government by 0% mortgages, right, or anything like that, or the wages going up. What we want is relative value between the first wave and one of the last waves. Then there might be the second wave starting for the first asset, right? So it goes on, and it's a self-feeding loop until it never ends, until it skips out a few, and then eventually gold and silver will go up, which is actually their second leg up in inflation. When it's an exit strategy for the ultra wealthy. I thought like um, Bitcoin or cryptos, I could never really put anywhere in the scale or in the time frame of the waves, because I always thought, and I think I was correct, like I always thought like it's going to be closer to stocks instead of currency or gold, because it's traded like a stock, it's speculative like a stock. Even though you, as a crypto guy, you might not think about it, JP Morgan does think about it like that. And I'm assuming they have now more invested in that than you, so they control the market. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but it will have another leg up. Everything will have another leg up. But I think we might go into a deeper recession. And of course, yeah, you have to think about like these are logical steps based on how we react, right? How the human psyche is, how we are influenced by stuff. But there will always be like excuses or fake um, made up stories why something is happening, because it has to. Like for instance, right? Oh, and I'm just making stuff up here. Oh, the price of wheat went up because of the hurricane, right? Whatever. Well, if it wouldn't have been the hurricane, then the excuse would be the tornado, or it would be the train crash that happened, right? Or it would be like there's always like a bunch of concurring events that we can, as people, can rationalize of what happened, why, right? But that's maybe not the actual source. It's more human psychological cycles that happen, and how fast news travels, and how fast the reaction of the government or reaction of the bigger entities is to something, basically not something, but the psychological effect of things. These waves might be longer or shorter in period. I always thought like the difference not between the increase and the first leg down, but the actual between between certain asset classes, I thought like, okay, it's going to be around 6 months, because I, from what I looked at, like in Europe, Eastern Europe, um, Soviet Union fall, South American crisis, Lebanon, and some of these crises, it's usually around that, but it doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be. If you take a look at the um, increase, the very earliest sign, I believe it was copper price or one of those, lumber price. That's immediately, as soon as I saw that spike, the house wasn't there, so immediately started investing in rental real estate, and right enough, of course, it went up, right? And then I bought food stocks, and then I bought stuff I'm trying out. Like, I'm not like perfect at timing, right? I also lost here and there, and then I sold everything, and now wages will be up eventually. So anyway, I don't want to keep on talking about the same topic, but that's why I want to say that we will rationalize things just like how we rationalize on why. And it's a sad comparison why the abuser abused you and you are at fault. It's just like the victim kind of tries to rationalize how it was his fault that he was abused. Very unfortunate, right? So, you know, but things happen, and those who pay attention, if they don't make any action or at least share it with other people, then it's as good as a tree falling in the middle of the forest. Nobody really hears it. Okay, or at least 46 of you are in the woods with me. Europeans having a rough winter. Energy up 7-10x. Very bad decision by leaders, quote unquote. Yeah, definitely. It's almost like as it's planned, right? Um, because energy in the modern era is not something that you can store in a city for a long term. You will become dependent on it. You will become dependent on government supplying it to you. If you would be living in outside somewhere near a forest, then you can chop trees. That's one thing, but those times are gone. So cities are centers for control, and energy prices, as bad as they are, um, it looks like it's not going to do a major I hope I'm wrong, but it's not going to do a major political shift um, in the sheep that we used to call the people of European countries, right? So it's most likely they're just going to be putting their hands out for subsidies and all of that stuff. So it's not actually bad for the leaders, because there's a very good quote, and I even read it out. I have a short video where I read this quote about how tyrants use the bad living conditions as a tool to their advantage. The UK grocery stores are starting to show obvious signs of warehouse shortages. Okay, I didn't know that. Um, what about the glut? The glut they're talking about. Oh, we have so much produce stacked up to the shelves, and that was the story here in the U.S. But I can tell some of my, so thanks for comment, Canadian Limey. I hope I pronounced that right. Some of my UK friends who didn't want to hear anything I had to say are now we're having conversations. That I can say. All right. Crypto Hodl says I was in Manila September 10th, 2011, landed in San Fran on September 11th. Good that you went to that city and not another one. Yeah, I try not to do opinions about those events because I wouldn't be on YouTube for long. In the woods with Arpad is a good place to be. As always, thank you. Well, thank you very much for all being here. Thank you for clicking the like button, sharing the content, at least with people who you care about or you want the message to be heard. Experiences. It would be ideal to have more questions so I could and not in the comments, you guys were awesome, but just generally in the comment section, if you have questions, it always drives me to do more videos, even though I have been very busy. um, and I wanted to mention, I almost said smash instead of click the button, which I'm not too happy about because I always think I'm unique enough where mind control doesn't affect me too much. But if something gets repeated too often on YouTube, it feels like that's the way it should be said, which it should not. So I don't like that. I don't like that. We have to think individually, and you should not agree with me on everything and have more questions. Yeah, what I wanted to say to before I go, if you stood here or listened to me this long, then I wanted to share something as a criticizing of the current state or moral state of society. Um, what I've noticed more and more how the language between parents and children is more like between friends, which I'm not a fan of, and I never call my son's buddy or something like that because I always call him son, or my dear son, even when I'm talking to him, and they call me father. It's never, hey buddy, how are you? It's like, do you feel do you feel that degrading the relationship? Because I feel that there's it's not necessarily moral decay, but the problem, in my opinion, with society is that we don't know what is what because we just mash everything together and then we use the wrong names for everything and turn everything upside down. And then because it's cool or because someone else is doing it without critically thinking what the long term effect of that may be, right? How that is different for your relationship, right? Or I've seen sometimes I go on YouTube without logging in, and it's full of this degenerate stuff of like it's horrible. I don't even want to give it energy to say like what's happening. And I thought like is this still YouTube? I thought it would be like videos about how to put gadgets stuff together or how to videos or it's not the same YouTube it was like 5 years ago. It's like people are, I mean, you can do whatever in your own relationship, but being proud on YouTube about it, of these, I mean, end time stuff, man. So yeah, wanted to say to watch out how you talk. And of course, English is my fourth language, so I do my best. But yeah, watch out for the words that you use and don't let me or anyone else put words in your mouth as if it's not correct or you don't feel it's the proper one. I think it all it all started when we stopped using proper language, which in neuroplasticity it probably messed up uh, connections in the brains of people, and then we end up with this. So yeah, think about that for tonight or tomorrow morning, and let me know what you think about that. All right. Have a good night. No, I'm not subscribed to Amazon or Netflix. I was never subscribed to Netflix, but then I knew who the Netflix CEO was related to, the propaganda uh, top propaganda. He was like the nephew of the top propaganda pusher in the U.S. who invented marketing and propaganda in the U.S. Look it up; it's on Wikipedia. Wikipedia probably. Which anyway, never subscribe to stuff that you don't agree with, and maybe that's totally different than what I agree with. But yeah. Read Romans chapter 1. It's a list of what's wrong today. Um, God gave them up. I'll take a look. Thank you. Maggie Smith says it's cultural. I don't think they mean body. I call my daughter sweetie sometimes, but that's different. Sweetie is different. Body is a relationship thing. Sweetie is an adjective. Like, okay, you are sweet to me. You can call your wife, your son, anyone sweet, because that's an adjective. That's how you value. The relationship is still mother daughter, but you put something on top of it to have it more weight. That's just weight, an adjective. But when you name someone who's not, you know, something, then I think that has a bigger effect, especially on a young child's mind. It's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but um, of course, I use words like that for my wife, sweetheart and dear and all of that stuff. I don't have any problems with that. I hope I don't start sounding like Andrew Tate. Boy, he got canceled, man. uh, but I do believe it's cultural, but culture should be we should be pulling the strings of culture as we want it. We should not let it be defined. Of course, if that is how you would want to define culture, that's also fine. But I might be pulling it in a different direction, and that's totally fine as well. James, thank you for all the comments. Do you recommend keeping a close eye on what children are learning in schools and on YouTube and TV? Don't send your children to public schools. That's the first thing. Forget silver, forget hyperinflation. If you let others manipulate the reality that is shaping their mind, the future's lost anyway. Without it doesn't matter how much silver you have. Um, I cannot give advice to anyone, but if one of you can afford that one of you stays at home and raises your children, that's more worth than any gold ever could buy. I mean, who are you gonna give all the silver and gold and whatever you accumulate during your life, right? So yeah. YouTube, yeah, I think it should be curated until they're 18, and after that, I believe it's up for them. I think you have your first 7 years that I don't think people should go to school until 7, or at least be homeschooled until 7. And once that consciousness has formed, then you can put more stuff, or you can purchase curriculums, or you can send them to Montessori school or whatever if you really don't want to do the schooling. But there's nothing that they teach until the year 7 that you cannot teach. If you have two brain cells to rub together, you should be teaching them until year 7. That's a must. After that, if you can afford to not work, then raise your own children. If not, someone else will be raising them for their own sake. The kids are ungovernable because this is part of a disarray of society. A Muslim sign, end of times. The maid will give birth to her master. End times, can't stop it. Yikes. Very well, even though I agree with many said, I have a bit more optimistic. Maybe the end times is optimistic. I don't know. No, I don't use Twitter. I don't use Twitter. I refuse to use Twitter. There are, I mean, I think I have an account, so just in case somebody links something, I can see it, but I don't use Twitter. I almost did it, the Twitter account for Star Path Academy to spread the content more. But if that's the price, maybe the content doesn't need to be spread. If I'm spreading it on Twitter. Of course, I'm saying this half jokingly. You are free to share the content on Twitter, but I need more simplicity in my life and not reading the opinions of people who don't give a rat's ass about me. So yeah, I mean, I may be too harsh. It's fine if you don't have to agree with me. Um, yeah. Yeah, I do have an account, but I only read stuff if you guys link something where if there's an article so it shows up. I don't use it for anything. Do you think we will be getting power cuts in the US? We have power cuts in the US. We have power cuts in the US if you live in bad cities. Of course, it's always an excuse. There's always an excuse, but it could be also the workforce is just so bad now that they are incapable of maintaining a system that was built by more capable men, you know. So, and I'm not necessarily speaking about the actual worker who connects the wire. I'm saying upper management. These systems were built, I mean, think about all the technology that was pushed out. And it looks like we're going to be here for another 10 minutes or 5. But but all the technology that was pushed out by very strong committed men who knew their place in society back 50 years ago, right? All the advancements and what we have been pushing out is really just computer science and software and digital stuff ever since that. There was, I want to be critical, I don't want to be too critical, but what are the major achievements in applied science, since, and to be honest, the theory of relativity came along. If you know more about Lorenz and other scientists and mathematicians before, then we have seen major things happen, right? But we're kind of peaked. We're kind of peaked in the 80s, man. All right. Of course, it might not be true. I do believe we could be on the brink of a new energy revolution because, boy, do we need it. But I think they need to sell it to us somehow, so it's not free. We'll see what happens. Yeah. I mean, you say very well said. No silver is worth the damaged child. Yeah. I mean, think about all these like millionaires and billionaires and all the almost every time, very few exceptions, the guys who make private banks for their families, right? Exceptions. But those who became rich fast in the sense of 1, 2 generations, they became rich fast. They always tend to have the fourth generation squander it, I believe, the fourth generation after the wealth has been acquired. Um, and it's a big cycle, rinse and repeat. And those who don't, those generations get to control everything. And is it not fair? It's almost like fair. You have to say it's fair because you were not able to keep the wealth, you know. Um, Crypto is the future, Internet 2.0. Crypto, it's a wide term. I do believe the technology that crypto came in on is somewhat the future. Yeah, I do believe decentralized applications are the future because if nothing else, the censorship solution needs to be implemented, and decentralized is the way to my understanding is the way. So definitely decentralized. And I had a conversation with Tannenbaum. He was not quite a teacher of me, but on my when I did my master's degree, I had the privilege to talk with him, and he talked about this expansion and contraction. So he wrote a bunch of computer science books, but he talked about the expansion and contraction, about centralized and decentralized, and using it as a cycle to predict things in technology, right? And just a very simple thing is, first you had one computer and you had the terminals. It was a very centralized solution, and through the terminal you would connect to this main computer, let run a program for a day, it would return you a value, something like that, very centralized. Eventually personal computers came along and became decentralized. Now your personal computer is much stronger than one computer, right? Now after that, what came in? Well, what came in was the cloud, and now all your files are pushing it up to Amazon for servers, and you don't own um, the real estate. You don't own your house. Forget about that. You don't own your data. Everything you push up to YouTube and centralized servers, right? So now it's being re-centralized, and we're just using the browser as a console to communicate, right? So again, we're just an interface that you own and you rent sometimes, right? Netflix people. So that is that. So naturally, that has to come. Torrents and some other stuff was the early on. Naturally it has to come to again a decentralized solution, control coming back to you. But they don't want it. They don't want this, like it's being pushed back. They will not be able to hold it, but they can kind of fake it with kind of fake decentralized solutions. But it will happen anyway. It just has its cycle. It has its own 5-year cycle, the 30-year cycle, and everything changes. But it's all a reflection of what we think here. Everything, this computer, whatever, is just a reflection of how the thought patterns in us change. And that's how we create the technology that is surrounds us. We want it to surround us how we think, right? We're just solving problems for ourselves. So eventually decentralized has to come back if we want to, if we don't want civilization to go bust, right? So I wouldn't say crypto is the future, but decentralized solution, which crypto is one of them, or some crypto is one of them, is, or it has to be the future if we want to keep our sanity. All right, we went to space on slide rules and primitive computers in the 60s and 70s. I'm only gonna comment 60s and 70s people were computer scientists, were true computer scientists. Not commenting about that stuff. But here's what I'm thinking. The the guys who did like the hardware programming, actually there are games made in hardware. The old like games, that the game stations where you paid pong or whatever, some of that was actually without any software at all. It was just transistors and capacitors and all of that stuff. I taught electrotechnics in school at some point, but anyway, so like you could build logic with these logical gate arrays, and we did FPGA programming and all of that stuff. Like, but what we were doing was building on top of the work of giants. They were the actual stuff. Like now anyone can become a computer scientist because you're just working with modules, but in order to understand what's in the module, and it's down to the physical level, only very few people actually understand that to the degree of like the silicon chips and transistors and everything else. Many can build it, many can build with it, many can run the actual factories, but the scientists who are putting those stuff together, or the drivers, the video card drivers that drive the graphics, the actual software that runs the hardware on the graphics card, there's only like a couple of people who know how to write that, and we were able to benefit from their knowledge, right? But it's very different. And I don't know what to like. does it like make sense now how nobody could rebuild the pyramids anymore, right? So yeah, conversations. Yeah, the Southwest doesn't have enough water and resources for infinite immigration, but could take a while to play out. Yeah, I mean, you can move into the desert and pump water to it, and it will be enough for a couple of families, but I don't think it's sustainable. You want to talk about sustainability? They're pushing for that stuff in cities, but God forbid, like 2 kilograms of CO2 you push out because you drove your car today, even though you might have planted hundreds of trees in your lifetime. Nobody will care about that, right? So it's all just made of stuff that's made up. Um, you should not care too much about it. And we'll have to relearn some very valuable lessons when we are building cities and the Tower of Babel or whatever. Yep. Did we? I mean, I'm not into the green agenda, but we do have to live sustainably. The issue is that if one man is like, if you can sustain yourself, if we drop you with a helicopter, a hatchet, and maybe um, a tent into the middle of nowhere, if you can sustain yourself, then there couldn't be enough people of you in the world. There's no overpopulation of people like you if you can sustain yourself plus produce extra. But if you cannot sustain yourself and you need extra, even one person is too much. When we talk about overpopulation, I mean, there couldn't be enough people who produce more value than what they consume, right? In a sustainable manner. Because there's always new ways how to figure out energy and everything. But if there's people who are not sustaining themselves and are drag, um, it's even two is more than enough. Of course, we can teach them and whatever, but not if you give them handouts, because handouts are better. They stick better than teaching people. That's very off topic. I like it. My wife wants me to buy a Chevy Tahoe. Okay. I don't know too much about the Chevy Tahoe. Chat, what do you think about a Chevy Tahoe? I know one thing. Your wife needs to be happy. So if you cannot buy the Chevy Tahoe, do something else. Yeah, I never use a car loan. I mean, to each their own. I never used a car loan. I would be happy with the used car. All right. Thank you for sitting through this. If you haven't, then do like the button. I hope you enjoyed this extension. I think we should have more talks about ideas and personal stuff, not necessarily hyperinflation. These are also enjoyable. Maybe we need a second channel. Who knows? Anyway, uh, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and talk to you next time. Bye.